Before you hit subscribe, just know this story might make you double-check the locks at your favorite museum tonight. Because what happened on a cold March morning in 1990 wasn't just a robbery, it was a performance. A crime so perfect, it still mocks the FBI 3 decades later. On March 18, 1990, while most of Boston slept off St. Patrick's Day, 2 men dressed as police officers pulled up to the gates of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Their patrol car's lights flashed red and blue against the old brick, cutting through the fog. The guards inside, tired and unsuspecting, thought it was routine. One of them pressed the buzzer, letting them in. That single decision would become one of the most costly mistakes in American history. Inside, the marble halls echoed with their footsteps. The faint hum of the alarm system filled the air before silence swallowed everything. One of the officers spoke calmly, saying they were responding to a disturbance. Minutes later, both guards were handcuffed, duct-taped, and locked in the basement. The museum now belonged to the thieves. Over the next 81 minutes, they moved with surgical precision through the galleries, methodical, unhurried, confident. They didn't smash or grab at random. They selected with purpose: Vermeer's The Concert, Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, Degas sketches, and Manet's Chez Tortoni. 13 pieces in total, worth over $500 million. It remains the largest unsolved art theft in modern history. But the strangest part wasn't what they took, it was what they left behind. Priceless works were ignored, even when within arm's reach. They took their time, even removing screws from frames instead of cutting canvases. Whoever they were, they knew exactly what they were doing. When the sun rose, the museum looked untouched from the outside. But inside it was a tomb, paintings gone, frames hanging empty, alarms disabled, and the 2 guards still bound in the basement. Detectives arrived hours later, stepping into an eerie silence that one officer later described as unnatural. The museum, he said, felt like it knew what had been taken. As investigators examined the rooms, they noticed a small torn strip of duct tape near the security desk. No prints, no DNA, nothing traceable. The surveillance footage was gone. Every tape from that night erased. But then, weeks later, one damaged reel was found, grainy, distorted, showing a man entering the same museum door the night before the robbery. He wasn't supposed to be there. And when investigators enhanced the image, the face looked familiar. The guards identified him as a former colleague who had quit weeks earlier. When police tried to locate him, he had vanished. No address, no records, no trace. The FBI called the heist one of the most disciplined crimes they'd ever seen. No ransom notes. No sightings. None of the stolen works ever resurfaced. It was as if the art had been swallowed by the earth. Today, the Gardner Museum still displays those empty frames, a haunting reminder of what was lost. The absence has become its own exhibit. Visitors walk past the bare spaces where beauty once hung, feeling the ghost of every missing masterpiece. But for investigators, humiliation runs deeper than loss. How could 2 men walk into one of the most secure museums in America, outsmart every system, and disappear forever? Months turned to years. Leads dried up. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some blamed organized crime, others suspected inside help. But one lead finally broke through the noise. An art dealer in Connecticut suddenly withdrew from public life after depositing millions into offshore accounts. When agents raided his storage unit, they weren't sure what to expect: guns, money, maybe stolen jewelry. Instead, they found a rolled-up canvas wrapped in cloth, about the same size as a Rembrandt. Under forensic lights, they slowly unrolled it. But it wasn't a painting. It was a note. Written in sharp blue ink, it read only, "You're looking in the wrong place." And the handwriting? It matched one of the missing guards. By the time the FBI took over, the case had already gone cold. Weeks of silence turned into months, and every lead seemed to vanish into thin air. The 2 guards, once considered victims, were now suspects. Both failed lie detector tests. Both gave conflicting stories about what they saw that night. One claimed the robbers called him by name. The other said he couldn't remember anything past the moment the fake officers arrived. Still, neither had money, contacts, or a criminal record that fit a job this clean. It didn't add up. pause, agents began to suspect something deeper. An inside hand that wasn't one of the guards but someone who knew the museum better than anyone else. The museum's former security chief, a man named Richard Abath, came under quiet scrutiny. He had been dismissed months before the heist after reporting missing equipment and strange after-hours activity, reports the administration brushed off. Now, those warnings looked like red flags no one had noticed. When investigators searched his apartment, they found nothing illegal, but one detail chilled them: a folded copy of a museum map, marked with small red dots. Each dot matched the exact locations where the stolen paintings once hung. Abath swore he didn't draw them. The paper, he said, had been left at his door the night before the robbery. Meanwhile, whispers started spreading through Boston's criminal underworld. Two brothers tied to the Italian mob were bragging in prison about knowing where the Gardner score was hidden. When agents questioned them, both men laughed it off. One said, "You think we'd be stupid enough to touch that kind of heat?" Yet a week later, he was found unconscious in his cell. No foul play, just gone quiet. He never spoke about the heist again. Detectives turned their focus to the art itself. Stolen art is like radioactive material. It glows in the black market. You can't sell it openly, and anyone who tries draws attention. But years after the robbery, small ripples appeared overseas. A Dutch informant claimed he'd seen the concert in a private villa near Amsterdam. The FBI followed the lead, and found nothing. Another informant in Ireland swore that Shea Tortoni was being used as collateral in a drug deal. Again, no proof. Every lead led to a wall of silence. It was as if the art didn't exist anymore. Still, one detail kept gnawing at investigators: the handwriting on that mysterious note found in the art dealer's storage unit. Forensic experts confirmed it matched the missing guard, Rick Abbott. But Rick had no reason to taunt the FBI. He was broke, living quietly under a new name in Maine. When agents found him, he looked worn down, older, paranoid, and tired of running from a past he swore wasn't his fault. "You think I'd risk my life for paintings?" he told them. "If I knew where they were, I'd trade them for peace." But something in his voice cracked when he said that word, peace. That night, the lead agent, Special Agent Morgan, went over the files again. The erased tapes, the guard statements, the missing art. Then he noticed something odd. One of the erased surveillance tapes had been re-recorded weeks later, but not from that night. The new footage was a short clip of the same museum room, recorded at dawn, empty except for a single figure standing still in the shadows. The figure was wearing a museum security jacket, one that hadn't been issued since 1989. Morgan froze the frame. The face was blurred, but the posture, the stance, it looked familiar. He cross-referenced the footage with older staff photos, and a chill ran through him. The figure wasn't either of the guards. It was Isabella Stewart Gardner herself, or rather, someone dressed to look exactly like her from one of her museum portraits. The outfit, the shawl, even the pearl necklace, identical. The figure stood still for 12 seconds before walking out of frame. The clip ended there. The museum denied having anything to do with it. But that eerie image spread like wildfire across the investigation rooms. Someone was playing games. Someone wanted the agents to feel like the museum itself was alive, guarding its secret. One officer described the atmosphere inside the building as haunted by intelligence. Another swore he could smell fresh paint in the Dutch room, even though no one had worked there in months. Years rolled on, and the case slipped from headlines into legend. But Agent Morgan never stopped. One night, while reviewing an old security system schematic, he spotted a detail that no one else had noticed: a sealed-off maintenance tunnel beneath the museum that hadn't appeared in modern blueprints. It had been closed since 1958. With a small team, he descended into the tunnel, flashlights sweeping over decades of dust and forgotten brickwork. Near the far wall, something metallic glinted in the dark. A box, old, rusted, but locked. They forced it open. Inside was a small, wrapped parcel. It wasn't a painting. It was a cassette tape, labeled only with a date, March 17, 1990, the night before the heist. Morgan stared at it, his pulse pounding. That was the same night the mysterious visitor appeared on the erased footage. When they played the tape, the sound of static filled the air, followed by faint footsteps, then a man's voice saying, "The show begins at dawn." Then silence. When Morgan looked up, one of his team members, the rookie, was staring at him wide-eyed. "Sir," he whispered. "That voice. It sounds just like Rick Abbott." The cassette tape changed everything. Agent Morgan had listened to it over 100 times, searching for hidden clues in the static. Audio experts cleaned up the sound, filtering the noise until something faint emerged beneath the man's voice, a faint hum. It wasn't random. It matched the low-frequency buzz of the museum's old HVAC system, which ran on a specific timer that shut down every morning at exactly 5:24 a.m. That meant the recording had been made inside the museum, hours before the heist began. Morgan went back through the visitor logs, tracing every entry, every name that might connect. That's when he found something buried in the old archives. The night before the robbery, a fire alarm had triggered for exactly 1 minute, then reset itself. No smoke, no damage. Just a false signal. But during that minute, someone had used the staff elevator to move between floors. The security logs showed the ID badge number, but the number didn't belong to any employee. It belonged to a museum trustee who'd passed away years earlier. The name sent a chill through the room: Eleanor Whitcomb, one of the original art donors who had spent her life preserving Isabella Gardner's legacy. She died in 1984, long before the robbery. But when Morgan pulled her archived file, something caught his eye. Among the trustee's records was a handwritten note attached to a photo of the museum's Dutch room. The note read, "When beauty is taken, so must it return in kind." For years, people thought the Gardner heist was about greed. But what if it was about restoration, or revenge? Morgan traced Eleanor's lineage, finding her nephew, a quiet antiques dealer in Vermont named Jonathan Whitcomb. On paper, he looked ordinary. But when Morgan compared handwriting samples from Jonathan's letters to the mysterious note found years earlier in the dealer's storage unit, it was a match. Jonathan was quietly brought in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. But as agents pressed, his calm began to crack. "You think I stole those paintings?" he said, leaning forward. "You think I wanted them for money?" Morgan didn't respond. He just slid a photo of the storm on the Sea of Galilee across the table. Jonathan's hand trembled. "That painting was never meant to be locked away," he whispered. "It was taken from the light, just like her." "Her who?" Morgan asked. Jonathan hesitated. Then, barely audibly, he said, "My aunt. She spent her life protecting art from people who didn't deserve it. She used to say every masterpiece deserves a witness. That night, I just made sure someone was watching." It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't denial either. When the agents searched his property, they found no paintings, no money, no evidence. But in the attic, tucked inside a wooden chest, was a single museum catalog page, one that listed all 13 stolen pieces. Each name had been carefully crossed out in red ink, except one, the concert. Morgan stared at it for a long time. "Why this one?" he asked when Jonathan was brought back in. The man smiled faintly. "Because music is meant to be heard. And when you listen carefully, sometimes the art plays itself." Months passed. The case reached another dead end, or so it seemed. Then, one quiet morning, a letter arrived at the Boston field office. No return address. Inside was a small, neatly folded note written on museum stationery. It said, "It's time the music played again." Alongside the note was a photograph, recent, not archival. It showed a dimly lit music room somewhere in Europe. On the wall behind a grand piano hung a familiar painting, the concert, untouched, perfectly preserved. Interpol traced the location to a private estate outside Florence, Italy. When local authorities arrived, the room was empty. The painting was gone. But the piano, the one from the photo, was still there, and inside its hollow frame, investigators found a rolled canvas hidden beneath the lid. It wasn't the concert. It was something else. A replica of the storm on the Sea of Galilee, but with one eerie difference. In the corner of the painting, where Rembrandt's self-portrait once stood among the terrified sailors, there was now a new figure, someone wearing a museum guard's jacket, holding a flashlight toward the waves. No signature. No explanation. Just silence. When Morgan saw the image, he realized what the message meant. The thief hadn't stolen for profit. They'd stolen to create a story, to rewrite art's history. Each piece taken wasn't destroyed but reborn, repainted, reimagined, hidden in plain sight. A perfect crime not of theft, but of transformation. The Gardner Museum eventually reopened the Dutch room to the public, leaving the empty frames hanging as a reminder of what was lost. Tourists still walk past them, whispering about the mystery. And if you listen closely, the museum guides say, sometimes late at night when the lights are low, the faint hum of a piano can still be heard echoing through the halls. Morgan retired years later, still haunted by the thought that the thief, or perhaps the artist, was still out there, watching the visitors gaze at the emptiness they left behind. The paintings were never recovered. But one detail, hidden in plain sight, went unnoticed until decades later. In the bottom corner of one of those empty frames, barely visible under layers of dust, were 3 tiny initials etched into the wood. EWW. Eleanor Whitcomb's initials. Morgan stood there in silence the last time he visited the museum, staring at those letters. Maybe it was her plan all along. Maybe it was her legacy. Or maybe it was a message meant only for those who still believe that art, like truth, never truly disappears. As he turned to leave, a single beam of sunlight cut across the frame, illuminating the carved letters like a signature at the end of a masterpiece. And somewhere in the city, an old piano began to play. If you think this story was intense, subscribe before the next one drops.